And although the primary task of the G-20 is to focus on our joint efforts to boost the global economy, we did also discuss a grave threat to our shared security, and that's the Syrian regime's use of chemical weapons. It was unanimous that chemical weapons were used, a unanimous conclusion that chemical weapons were used in Syria. There was a unanimous view that the norm against using chemical weapons has to be maintained, that these weapons were banned for a reason, and that the international community has to take those norms seriously. I would say that the majority of the room is comfortable with our conclusion that the Assad government, was responsible for their use. I would greatly prefer working through multilateral channels and through the United Nations to get this done. But ultimately, what I believe in even more deeply, because I think that the security of the world and my particular task, looking out for the national security of the United States, requires that when there's a breach this brazen of a norm this important, and the international community is paralyzed and frozen and doesn't act, then that norm begins to unravel. And if that norm unravels, then other norms and prohibitions start unraveling. And that makes for a more dangerous world. And that then requires even more difficult choices and more difficult responses in the future. In terms of the votes and the process in Congress, I knew this was going to be a heavy lift. Each member of Congress is going to have to decide, if I think it's the right thing to do for America's national security and the world's national security, then how do I vote? And you know what, that's what you're supposed to do as a member of Congress. Ultimately, you listen to your constituents, but you've also got to make some decisions about what you believe is right for America. These kinds of interventions, these kinds of actions, are always unpopular because they seem distant and removed. And I want to make sure I'm being clear. I'm not drawing an analogy to World War II, other than to say when London was getting bombed, it was profoundly unpopular, both in Congress and around the country, to help the British. Doesn't mean it wasn't the right thing to do.